Hello, hello, hello. This is Truth Be Told. This is Dr. Walter Aka.
And of course, you remember me, Leroy Horton.
And hi, I'm Dr. Layla Hishaw, and I'm so excited to be a guest here on Tooth Be Told. I'm a big fan, and I'm so grateful to be here with both of you.
You know,
Beautiful.
yeah, I'm excited. Oh, before we begin, I want to say happy belated birthday. Yes, on the
Hey,
12th. You
happy
know,
birthday to you.
I know. I was telling everybody last year it was the big 50. So it was like, oh, I'm 50 and fabulous. And then
that's
this
it.
year it was like, I'm just in my 50s now.
Oh, see, on
But
this podcast, we like to try to lie to the audience. I'm still 21, so I want you to go
okay.
ahead and go with that, right? We
Yes,
will lie
yes.
about
We're
our
all
age.
21 today.
Exactly. We're all
Oh man,
21.
I tell you.
But
But I've seen a lot, I've learned a lot, and yes, that's why I'm excited to kind of talk about what I've learned and what needs to happen going forward.
that's it. And so,
Absolutely.
I wanted to bring, you on as somebody who is doing incredible things in dentistry in general. Not only are you a busy practitioner of two offices, three, but now two, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you also have a mentorship. You have so many things going on, nonprofit. And so we'll get into all that, but just give us a quick summary of how you got here. How you got
How
here.
I
That's what I
got
want to
here.
know.
I know there's a big arc to the story, but I'll narrow it down. And I think too, and I will have to say this is probably for a lot of um, women of color, people of color. I think growing up, I just always had in the back of the head, in my head, well, my mom always told me growing up, this Layla, you're always going to have to do twice as much to get half as far. You need to sit in the front row, right in the center. Make sure you're asking those questions to your teacher, and just it was just always instilled in me that and it came from a good place, right? My mom grew up in segregation,
Hmm.
and a lot of things, racism, biases that we're going to talk about
Mhm.
happen, and so this is what shaped her, and so she just wanted to prepare me so that I could do the best and succeed. But deep down inside, there was always that I got to do more. I got to do more. It's not enough to be, a leader in an organization or join an organization. Is I got to be the president, and and to the point that that does start to kind of grow and grow, and to the point where you're like, oh wow, wait, what just happened? There's too much going on. So now I'm at the point. It's like, okay, this is what we really need to focus on. What is priority, and realize that you can't serve your family, your community, your practice if you're overwhelmed and exhausted.
Mhm.
But I say that to say that yes, I did. I got my undergraduate degree at Pepperdine in sports medicine. The plan was to, again, mom was like, you have to make sure that you're in a profession that you can take care of yourself and not have to depend on anybody.
There it is.
And it was always like, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a doctor. But I went through and I worked as a student athletic trainer, and I just knew that this wasn't what I really wanted to do.
Mm.
But I had to get through it. So, what a lot of people didn't know is I was actually born in Iran. So, I grew up with my mother and my grandmother in an African American household, but my father was Persian. And so I was born there, and he was actually a dentist. But I
Mm.
didn't get to grow up with him. My mother and I had to leave during the revolution. And I promise I'll wrap this all around.
No, no, no.
No,
This
no,
is
no,
good.
no. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. And so during the revolution, of course, it wasn't safe for Americans to be there. And like a lot of families, they separated. So I didn't get to see him work as a dentist. But fate would have it that after I graduated with my degree in sports medicine, and here I am studying for the MCAT and knowing deep down inside, I was like, I just don't want to do this. I finally got a chance for the first time since I was born to go visit Iran again. And it was there that I got to see him. He was a prosthodontist, and he also taught as well. He had a private practice, and he loved teaching. And I can tell now that's also why I love mentoring, because he was such a great mentor. And I was like, "Hey, this is great." I love seeing what he was creating. I love the enthusiasm of his students around him. And so I came back and I was like, I want to do dentistry. And so I applied to dental school and University of Missouri, Kansas City, where I grew up, and knew I loved children. I am the oldest of three. I have two younger sisters, like 9 and 10 years my junior. So I was in a single parent home. So of course I was pretty much the built-in babysitter, and is always there to try to take care of them. I a coach and mentor for youth camps in the summer. So youth and children is what I loved. So I decided to go into pediatric dentistry. And what brought me to Tucson was I met and fell in love with my husband now, who was doing a residency here in Tucson in neurology. It was a combined program. So he's a board certified neurologist and psychiatrist, which is great
Okay.
because he does a lot of behavioral neurology. My father passed away from ALS, so I can see how degenerative neurological disease can have such a mental impact on someone. But we've been here ever since that was a 7-year program. I decided to, after working 1 year in a group practice, that, I knew I wanted the autonomy, still that ambition in me that was seeded for my mother, to start a practice. And I will tell you this really quick too. So I finished my residency in 2002 and got married, moved to a new city and started a new job all in the same summer. After that group practice, I started my private practice. And at the time, there were no female pediatric dentists at all. I was actually the first woman pediatric dentist to own a practice. And still fact checking that there's actually, I think it was the first woman pediatric dentist ever in Tucson. It's a very small community. And there's only 6 other pediatric dentists.
Hmm.
So the practice grew so quickly. Mothers wanted to bring their kids to a mother as a dentist. And actually the week before I opened my practice, I found out I was expecting my first daughter. So all those things I could kind of merge together. But I will tell you that it grew. I needed to bring on an associate. That associate then bought in, and then we were busting at the seams. So we built a second practice that was growing. We're in a great area that continued to grow and grow. And then we acquired the third practice. And so my head was just down to the grind, just moving everything forward and forward. And then that's when all of a sudden I just was kind of exhausted, kind of burned out, and this numbing behavior one evening. I was just scrolling through Facebook because I just couldn't do a chart, right? And that's when I saw when the ADA released the statistic again about the lack of Black dentists was still at that 3.8%. And looking back, you see there was like a flat growth over the last, 4 decades actually. And I was just so surprised at that. I was like, what? Here, this is the same. I know 20 years ago when I was in dental school, I was one of 4 Black students, but I had no idea things hadn't changed. I mean, I was busy growing a family and growing a practice, 3 practices. And so that's just the instinct in me was that's not right. What can I do? And I put out a post on Facebook and just say, hey, this is just the statistic. Whose kid can I mentor? And that's what birthed our nonprofit diversity and dentistry mentorship. And that was back in 2018. And then we formalized it, incorporated into the nonprofit of 501(c)(3) in 2021. And I'm just so proud of just how it's been so embraced because there was a need. I think when we talk about purpose is really when you are passionate about something you fill that gap, that's your purpose. And Dr. Horton, thank you so much. You were there right also to help and work as far as a mentor in our virtual mentorship by,
Mhm.
speaking to us and doing a webinar and also mentoring now. And yes, Dr. Cott, we have room for more mentors. So I want you to
Come on in, brother. Come on in.
You know what? If
we
Horton
need
does it,
more because
I'll
there's
do it
a
twice.
long list of mentees. But that's pretty much where I am. I'm still practicing full time. I'm working, 4.5 days a week. Every day after work, there's a meeting. There's some committee meeting, or there's a meeting with my mentees, or we're planning the youth summits and scaling the youth summit across the nation, and still trying to work on these matching our one-on-one mentorship with pre-dental students from underrepresented groups. So yes, we're aiming to increase the applicant pool of qualified and deserving students from underrepresented backgrounds, Black, Latinx, and Native American, Alaska Native, to be exposed to dentistry and explore it, but to get them really prepared through mentorship. And then if we have a big applicant pool, there's no reason for these dental schools not to find these candidates to invite them to
Very
dental
nice.
school. Thank you for letting me share all that. That was a
Yes,
lot.
that is, there's so many questions. I wrote down like a
Okay.
page full of notes. I don't know if you can see with my filter. Let me, if you'll allow me, Walt, to open up with kind of a
Yes.
cultural question, right?
Okay.
So I had an immigrant experience when I was young too. And if my math is right, if you're 51-ish, the
Oh,
revolution was like in
21.
21, yeah.
Thank
The revolution
You're right.
was like 78, 79, right?
you. Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
Mm-hmm.
you lived a portion of your life in Iran that you remember.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yeah.
came here, were you culturally Persian and had to like adapt? What was it like when you're coming over and you're Persian in your mind, and now you're coming into the US where there's like all these different identities and groups and kind of
Oh
finding
my
where you
goodness.
fit? What was that like?
Well, you know what? It
Mm.
was hard. It was hard. I felt like I didn't belong.
Mm.
I will say when I was in Iran, and when I came back, I was about 5 years old. But my father's family is very westernized. You know, we still celebrated Christmas. They loved all that kind of fun stuff, and they spoke English. So my mom learned Farsi while she was there. She taught English. Um, but when we moved back to the United States, because what was happening with the revolution and the Iranian hostage crises, I didn't want anyone to know I was Iranian. So I kind
Mm,
of hid that. But at the same time, on the playground, and I would see how my friends were being treated and being called out of their names and just the racism that was happening. You know, kids, we picked that up when we're young, right? We can see that.
right.
I almost didn't want to be associated as being Black. So I
Mm.
was just
Right.
kind of straddling both, just losing who I
Mm,
was and trying to hide who I was. When my mom remarried, I took my stepfather's name because my maiden name was Baharlu, and I
Mm.
just didn't want to have to explain where Baharlu came from. And then looking back, of course, I know that was so hurtful to my father, and and two, I kind of pushed down that the richness and Persian culture is just so beautiful. And happy Nowruz, there's Nowruz right now,
mm,
as well. Um, so to answer your question, it was challenging, but I was in such a loving, big, extended family in the African American community at home. So I felt comfortable there. It's kind of just when I was outside and being very sensitive Pisces as I was. I think that's a lot of the reasons why I would try to hide who I was. And unfortunately, when that happened and that continue, then losing a piece of who you are, you kind of lose your voice. And it wasn't until I became older and realized that, hey, if I'm not who I am, I can't lead
Mm.
mm.
authentically. I can't love. I can't give authentically. And so I'm so glad that just some self development and understanding and encouragement helped me to kind of grow out of that. And that's another part of what I want to do now as I move into this next season of life is to really try to reach out to leaders in dentistry and uh, people of color, my mentees, especially women of color, young women of color, to let them know that to really truly embrace who they are. And when they do that, they are going to not only find joy, but succeed in life.
Man,
Indeed.
so one thing that I think we can all relate to is coming to the U.S. and almost being, I don't want to say shamed, but wanting to fit in so much with what you thought America was that you
Mhm.
forget how important and rich your culture really is. I remember growing up, like when my mom would take me to the bus stop, I didn't want to speak Fonte. I was just like, no, let's speak English. Like that's, I just want all the kids to just know that there's nothing different about me whatsoever. And that's
Mm,
something that,
Mhm.
I think we all share as somebody that came from another country. So it's
right.
just funny to hear that we're all from literally different parts of the world,
Yeah.
but we all have the same story when we come to the US.
Yes.
So that's
And,
something that's
and if
interesting.
I
And then you
could
become
add
very,
to,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm so sorry
No, no, no.
to interrupt. I was just going to add that when I'm talking to my mentees, they share stories like this, of kind of wanting to hide who they are, but also to assimilate.
That's right.
What we're told was what society tells us is professional. I would always straighten my hair, and usually my hair is curly now. You said I'm always gonna wear my hair curly, but I straightened it. But anyway, but had a situation from a colleague who, didn't think I was Black enough because I didn't look Black, right? And
Mm.
so I wasn't qualified to speak on diversity. And that's just a bias that I'm sure, we'll get into a little bit later. But it is professional to wear your hair any way it is. It doesn't have to look that way. You don't have to, when we talk about age bias, when I first started out, um, you know, people thought I was way younger than I was. And so I wanted to act older. So I would look older, I would speak different, and, that would happen. And yeah, it's just having to be okay with who we are and try to break these stereotypes.
Right. So, my question for you is, in dental school, you said you were one of four minority
Mhm.
students in that school, correct? At
Mhm.
that time, did you feel like you were an outlier, an outcast in that sense of, hey, there's only four of us, right? Was that something that was very prominent to you at the time when you were going through dental school, or did that not even come up based on your environment, whatever it may be?
Oh no, it came up, and we were very, very tight. In fact, I'm still close to all three. One of our classmates passed away shortly after dental school.
Mm,
Um, and we were the ones we studied together, hung out together, went to each other's houses for dinner because unfortunately, not all the time were we invited to those study groups and other groups like that. Um, but at the same time, because that strong leadership that was instilled in me from a young child, um, I was decided I wanted to run for class president. And it was a pretty tough campaign the first year, but I worked hard, and I love what I did, and I got the support from my classmates. So I know there was a good core of them who just really embraced us, but there are situations, not so much all the classmates, there's a handful here and there. But sometimes though in the clinic, sometimes the attending maybe took a little bit longer to come to us, or they would just check on and everybody else before they got to us. And so yeah, we just kind of had to deal with those conversations that we had. And so being together allowed us to have that space, I say space just to just commiserate one, but know that, hey, this is just a kind of a microcosm of where we are right now. It's going to be the same thing as when we get out in the real world, and we just have to push through. This is where we learn that perseverance and that resilience. But no, I would say, luckily it didn't hurt me so much directly because, like I said, I had the support. I was class president and continued as president all 4 years. But I saw it more so on my other students that, maybe it for me, you could say I could pass. Maybe they weren't quite sure who I was
mhm.
in the beginning as far as embracing as those relationships initially.
Well, it's crazy to me that, like Walt said, there's three of us from different parts of the world and all have these very similar and overlapping experiences. And what you just expressed, I feel, is such an important component of our experience when we're in dental school. And all three of us had that very similar experience, right? One of few.
Mhm.
And it brings me to one of the challenges we've had in recruiting in the Northwest. It's that this notion of critical mass.
Yes.
Every time we did recruiting efforts and we got super qualified Black applicants that got interviews, they would come to the school, look at all the class photos, look around and be like, yeah, I'm out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And or we would have our homegrown doctors that live here. They would openly say, no, I'm sending all my mentees, all my kids to the South or to the East Coast because they have to have cultural support. So what is the answer for a school that maybe wants to increase diversity, but because there's no critical mass, no one wants to
Yeah.
come and be that
That's
pioneer
true.
and be that one of few. So what do those discussions look like in your circles?
Yeah, no, and we are having those discussions, especially um, as we are trying to reach out and bring the youth summit to dental schools. We talked to University of Washington as one, and we had that conversation. Joel Berg, a past dean of UW School of Dentistry, he said, "Yeah, we would invest, we would reach into the community. We had them right there." And then, they come and then we lose them. We lose them to the other schools because they're not seeing anyone else like them around there like them. And you're right, it's gonna take a critical mass to make them feel like they would feel welcome and supported, not only to, get into dental school, but also to get through dental school. But I think to make that critical mass happens, we're gonna have to look at money. Where are the barriers there? If other schools can offer that they have a more diverse population of students, then schools like in the Pacific Northwest has to say, well, but we can help break down that financial barrier and give some scholarship money. So it'll be easier for you not to have so much debt coming out. And you have to accept more students of color to see. And I haven't just heard yet is any other options as far as are there some pathway programs to guarantee admission if you do certain programs with them in the summer leading up to it, like, and help them to, if their grade point average is at a high score and they're doing well at DAT, that they can get an automatic admission, knowing that this is what they're working them towards. Then hopefully that can keep them, in that school versus being kind of poached from another school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I remember when we were kind of going through school, we talked, when I was applying for schools, one thing that I remember was how little money I had to do the stuff that my, I guess, classmates after kind of did, right? When they went to Kaplan, they did, what was the other one?
There was Princeton. There was a Princeton
Princeton.
review, a
That's
Kaplan
it.
review. Yeah.
They did so many of those. And I was like, I can't afford to do any of that stuff. Right. So how do we help those students who have a hard time traveling? I think the only, I'm going to say this, the only thing that I remember that came out of COVID that was good was no one was traveling. So we had an
Yes.
equal playing field, right? You didn't have to pay for your flights and hotel and everything. So everybody was equal. You could apply to every school you wanted because
Right.
no one was traveling.
No
That
one
was my
traveling.
biggest
Yeah.
hurdle, right? That was my biggest
Yeah.
hurdle, was trying to say, hey, I want to apply to these schools, but I don't have the money to go visit those schools or go to the interviews and so forth. And I know they didn't have Zoom at the time. This was, of course, last year, since
Yeah.
I'm, 21, right?
Think
Right. They
about
didn't
it.
have Zoom or any of that stuff. So what are we
Right.
doing to basically, kind of, like you said, lower that fee
Yeah.
service? And because it gets expensive when it comes to applications and traveling and doing all that stuff. What are we doing in that sense to help these mentees?
Yeah, well, diversity and dentistry mentorships, we are now implementing a monthly scholarship through our corporate sponsors of the month. We'll be giving out $500 to a pre-dental student and $500 to dental students every month. And there are other programs too, now with NDA and their scholarship program. I mean, so many. That's what it takes. It's just being able to assist these students and being able to afford it. One of our smaller campaigns, we called it just one more chance. And basically, we were just trying to pay the application fee for one more school that these students could apply for.
Mhm.
So yes, you're talking, the cost of traveling and interviewing. We added it up. I mean, it gets to be in the thousands of dollars because you may have to take time off work, or you may
Yeah.
have to pay for childcare. And then you're going to get something new to wear, and that's just the interview part. But when you look at um, our cohorts from the dominant group, they may be able, you hear them, you see them on like the dental network, student dental network, right? They're talking
Oh, they
about, well,
still have that?
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
applying to 20
boy.
dental
Yeah.
schools. And it's discouraging
Yeah.
to some other students who don't have the means to be able to apply to that many schools, because you're right there statistically, you don't have as great a shot as they do who
That's
can
it.
apply to more. So we try to give them just money, even just a little bit helps. Just if everybody could just see that supporting organizations that are trying to build these scholarships up for these students is going to really offset so much of a burden and help them to even have a chance.
Mm.
It's just like these students are sometimes just, you know, maybe even from high school, strong in STEM, but maybe overlooked by the college counselor who never said, have you considered dentistry? Because I think if we know earlier on in undergrad, then we can prepare them. When we're talking to the high school students at our youth summits during the panel discussion, we lay out how much it costs to apply to dental school and all that, so they can prepare as they're going along and have some savings. They're working towards something. But if we're waiting to talk about dentistry when students are in college, one is too late because they're on the wrong educational path. They may be taking, a whole different major and not getting the prerequisites. And it's not to say that they can't go back and retake it. You can always do that, but that costs money. If you're changing your major and having to take more units. But so yes, once waiting to college is waiting too late to change your major, but also you're not giving the extra runway time to save up for it.
Mm.
So, and yes, of course, there's loans and whatnot, but you already be coming out with a lot of loans once you get into dental school. Um, besides the scholarships and saving, it's important too, again, and this is why we want to reach students when they're younger to let them know about a career in dentistry, is so that the family and the extended family around them can support them in this dream and make decisions that will help them be able to afford it. And perhaps instead of paying for a new shiny car, the family will look at maybe getting a used car and saving that money for them that will go towards their application fees and testing fees and stuff like that. But it's just, it's each family's decision. But when everyone's on the same page,
Mhm.
then that's going to help them kind of push them over the finish line
Sure.
together.
Yeah, it does take a community to really foster the excellence and the potential that exists with some of the children in our midst that often go unseen. Um, you know,
Mhm.
but I do got a question for you because we're talking about diversity, and we had this interview with Don Lemon and Elon Musk. So this is the question I was dying to ask. And Elon Musk, like many other people in the majority,
Right.
seems to conflate DEI
Mhm.
with lowering standards and accepting underqualified applicants,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
Now, we know whether it's the Alson study out of Oakland, where they paired Black men with Black doctors and they saw improved patient outcomes, even when compared to financial incentives. Just having a Black doctor increased patient acceptance, patient sharing, taking tests, and so forth. So we're looking at patient outcomes. We don't want diversity just for the number's sake or to diversity for the sake of diversity. What do you say to this majority, this half the country almost? Because
Yeah.
Trump and some of them carry at least half the country, if not more. They see diversity, equity, inclusion as some four-letter word that automatically means excluding the qualified majority kid for the sake of the underqualified DEI kid.
Mm.
What's the lexicon we need to start using so that we can explain to them what exactly the purpose of diversity is?
Right. Oh my goodness. It's so true. And it's so hard. And sometimes it's scary
Mhm.
to to, elevate your voice to talk about it, even for myself. And it is disheartening because I think it's just missing the point of why DEI was put into place in the first place. Right. But when you have people like Elon Musk, I mean, it really, if you trace back eras ago, when countries were colonized, it was always a superiority of them just putting themselves above the other populations, of being more intelligent um, and and so from that has what has just invaded the systemic part of racism that we're dealing with, as we see not only in healthcare, but in our education, and then redlining and housing and all of that. That is what we talk about with systemic racism. And so DEI was put in place to show that we needed to also recognize that our populations who aren't represented are just as qualified and needed to take an extra look at them to see where they could be, bring their talents to the workforce, to healthcare, to education. And it is to secure that possibility that we would have a fair chance. When they talk about a meritocracy, it's not that. It's just, we can see that there's a lack of people who are educated who are in top CEO positions who shouldn't be there. I won't
Yes.
even say maybe even
In
in our
presidential
government.
positions.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know that's right.
oh.
But we have to. The DEI is important so that we can ensure that diverse perspectives and representation is there. As you said, the data is there. Research shows, like you said, I mean, health outcomes are improved when we have doctors who reflect that the communities. Um, and patients have more compliant and build that trust and if we could really think, we're a dentist here, and even for medical providers, well, I mean, we all take an oath to do no harm, but we are doing harm when we are not putting caretakers or caregivers into the communities to to meet their needs. And that is why it shouldn't be looked upon as a four-letter word. And we're taking, taking all the pieces of pie. There's enough for everyone, but there's a whole group of communities who are not getting the care that they need. That disparity is there because we don't have the providers to help them and to serve there. So, and diversity too, even when I'm talking to colleagues about, hey, do you want to be a mentor? And they're white. And they're like, oh, I don't think any of the mentees will want me to be their mentor. And I said, but we need you because with the lack of Black dentists or Hispanic or Native American, there's not enough of us to go around.
Right.
And you don't
Right.
have to look like your mentee to have a good mentorship relationship, to share the same values.
Right.
They just need someone who will believe in them and to guide them because we're all starting from different places. So it doesn't matter. You're just going to meet them where they are and guide them to the goal they want to achieve. And it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. So DEI
Right.
or not, we need everyone's help in this so that if we truly want to not do harm and care for everyone and with the same oral health access and to get the outcomes we need, then we need to help raise the next generation of diverse leaders in dentistry in the oral
And
health field.
if I can piggyback off that real quick, Walt,
Mhm.
because I wanted to set you up with that because this is a hard question that some people try to avoid answering. I'll give you the option of answering or not answering. But
Mhm.
if we know that increasing the diversity within the student body increases or improves patient outcomes, and every school claims in their mission statement that they want to serve the underserved.
Mhm.
What is your opinion on whether or not schools should say boldly and loudly, we're going to hold positions specifically for X amount of Black students, X amount of Hispanic students, because they do that geographically, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whammy states here in Washington, for Washington, Alaska, what is it?
Oh yeah,
Idaho and
yeah.
Montana, right? They give
And
preferential treatment, in-state tuition, and so forth. So that it's done. Why can it not be done on the basis of demo or ethnicity and race? And should it be? Should spots
Mhm.
be held by institutions if
Yeah,
if
yeah.
improved patient outcomes is an expressed goal?
I think it should. I think it should. And unfortunately, it just has to be the a courageous leadership in the schools to be able to implement that. Um, it, it, you're right because they do hold that space for other students. I remember in Kansas City, there was a relationship with the state of Hawaii, so we had a lot of students from Hawaii because there was no dental school there.
North
But they
Carolina
did that.
has North Carolina
Yeah.
has Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
why are they doing that? Because they need providers in those states.
Yeah.
So if we need
Exactly.
providers in these communities, then it's their job to make sure they're educating these providers to go back and serve. Um,
Hmm.
And it's just, I mean, it's so sad. Like my daughter is an undergrad, I mean, yeah, second year undergraduate student. And I remember her when acceptances were coming out and Instagram, thank God we weren't coming up when social media was there. I just don't know how I could handle it.
I agree.
But it was,
I
yeah,
100%
it's
agree.
just awful.
Yeah.
But that was just so awful that, some of her friends who got accepted into an Ivy or, really competitive school, and she got into a competitive school, but it's a state school, but it was out of state, so it was really competitive. Um, but the automatic things in the comments were like, well, no, of course it's going to be easy for you because you're, the token, right? They had to accept a few black people or
Yeah.
whatnot. And so it's almost to the point where these students don't even want. I know right now it was acceptance day, and students aren't even wanting to say anything. They don't even want to share it because they don't want to be made to feel bad, like they don't belong. And then that gets into the whole belonging thing. Is And I hear this from my mentees all the time when
Hmm.
they get into dental school and they are one of four or less. There's one mentee, she was the only black student.
Yep.
And you're always felt like there's a sign on your back. It's like, I don't deserve to be
That's it.
here. They just let me
Yeah.
in.
That's it.
And then
Yeah.
you're constantly having to prove yourself
That's it.
more and over than anybody else has to. And like I shared earlier as we opened up, it's like I just maybe that's why. Ooh, this is therapeutic. Thank you guys.
Come on now. Come
Maybe
on now.
that's
We're here
why
for
I was
you.
like,
Let
We're
it
here for
out. Let
you.
it out.
I'm gonna give up tissue. No, I mean maybe that's why I was like, well, I gotta prove that I can keep my grades up, I can
That's
do
it.
good in clinic, and I can be their president, and I
That's it.
can address everyone's needs and of course I also knew I needed to do even more so that my portfolio would be strong because I knew I wanted to specialize. So we put a lot on ourselves. But yeah, back to the whole belonging thing. That's when they start to doubt themselves, they don't get that support, and sometimes they don't matriculate through. And that's so disheartening.
Yeah.
Wow. We're gonna solve the world's problem. I swear by the end of this. By the end of this world will be
Together we
more
will.
diverse. This
Yeah.
world will be more diverse. But let me,
But yeah, it's just conversations like these, and I appreciate you guys having this
no.
because I think a lot of us feel that way, but until we come together, it is difficult. So I
That's it.
apologize, but
No,
yes,
no, no,
thank
it's
you again.
okay. No, no. So diversity includes multiple multitudes of things, right? It's not just race. I want people to understand diversity is a multitude of things. And one thing is, this is still in March. It's Women's History Month, right? And you mentioned something at the beginning. You said you were the only
Mhm,
female pediatric
mhm,
dentist in Tucson,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
You said that, and then you're thinking to yourself, well, okay, how's this going to go? And you ended up realizing that mothers, by the way, if people don't know, mothers are the ones that usually make appointments for everybody.
Yes.
So if
Yes,
you're smart, you want to cater to mothers. I'm just going to put it out there,
right.
everybody. Okay.
Yeah, it's true.
so so you did, right? You basically said, I have you could relate to mothers because I think you said that you had just given birth at the time too,
Yeah,
so you could
yeah.
relate.
Hmm, hmm,
And there's a
hmm,
lot to be said in that. So can you explain that kind of
hmm,
relationship from that point of view where you're trying to build a practice, so you're building a business, right? And your business is growing, but you also have that human touch, that motherly touch, right? To basically make people comfortable because when they come into your office, it's not, oh, okay, my kid needs to behave. My kid, you're like, your kid is a
Oh,
kid,
yeah.
right? Your kid is a kid.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's not
We
like,
get
you
it.
know how like whenever you go on an airplane, you have a child and if you have another kid, you feel bad for that mom or dad who's taking care of
Yeah.
that crying baby. But whoever
Mhm.
doesn't is the one that usually has an attitude, and then everybody hates that person, right? So
So
I
true.
say all that to say, can you explain how being
Hmm.
a woman in dentistry not only has shaped your practice, which you explained it did, but also has shaped how you perform and how you practice dentistry?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's true. Because before, when I was a resident and I was not a mother yet, when I would have these moms saying, I can't brush their teeth at night. They're like kicking, screaming. I just can't do it. I'm like, what? she's an adult. Can't you brush their teeth? And I'm just like dismissing that. I was like,
Right,
whatever.
right.
Then I had my child, and I was always say, I like someone's gonna call CPS on me because she's screaming her head off, and I'm just trying to brush her teeth.
That's it.
And so
That's
I
it.
can, and I think that when you have, and this says, this affinity towards one another because you share similarities, in that I can say, I get it, I understand. I know it's hard and it's easier said than done, but let me explain why it's important that we can't let them go to sleep without brushing their teeth, right?
Right.
I've been there. I remember I had to hold her in a headlock to get it done. But I knew the alternative is that I didn't want to have to put her under anesthesia to fix her teeth. And we got to keep these baby teeth till they're, 10 to 12 years old. And it would go through that. So when I can connect on that level, then it's more of, like you said, you're building a relationship. And it's not so much because I'm in pediatric dentistry, I always try to say parents, so that patient-parent relationship
Right.
is more of, almost like a peer to peer or woman to woman, and say, I understand, and this is what we need to do. And mothers, I would hear this too, and I would see it in reviews. We loved coming. Dr. Hishaw, she's a mother. She gets it. She understands. She had, a soft touch with my child. She spoke to her, and I could take it to the other extreme too. Like if I have a defiant patient in the chair, I'm just not listening. I'll look at mom. I was like, I'm about to do the mommy voice. Okay, are you okay with that? She's like, oh yeah. I was like, okay, I'm going to need you to quiet down
Uh-oh.
right this minute and
Uh-oh.
put your hands down and listen to my instructions.
Ooh.
And all of a sudden,
Oh my God. I had PTSD. The only thing that was missing was that look.
Right.
is that look, but it's almost that nod, not
Right.
right for
Right.
for a woman to woman, and in Tucson is not that very diverse either. So anytime my husband or I, see someone else, the nod, right, at the
Mhm.
black person seeing another black person, like I see you, how you doing, that kind of thing. Um, Speaking of my husband, he's tall, African American, handsome, strong, brilliance for just perfect, right? But why do people ask him? Like I told you, he's board certified neurologist, psychiatrist. But when you meet him, because of his height, it's like, did you play basketball in college?
There it is.
He still gets it. He still gets it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm,
It's
mm.
just so it's just biases. It's just, these kind of mental shortcuts that are shaped by societal norms and stereotypes. But I know that it's just a biases that people just need to be aware of.
Well, let me
All
ask you
right,
this.
I switched that back from limb to that.
No, no, no. It's all good.
When it comes to biases, one thing that I've seen in my circles is this question. Well, if you're in a predominantly white circle and you're having conversations, especially about the issues of race and racism and so forth, I often get this question where they just explain to me why racism doesn't exist. And then they use me as the example
Right.
as why it
Oh yeah.
doesn't exist. And they say, well, clearly everything is good now, right? Look how far you've come,
Oh,
right? Which for me triggers a whole cascade of conversations we have to have, right? But one of the things that I've noticed is that,
Mhm.
for instance, and for our white brothers and sisters that are watching this, we're all brothers and sisters. So, but we're talking about the issue, so we have to reference who the majority is and who the dominant group is. What I've noticed is that specifically white women will acknowledge that sexism exists
mm,
and that gender representation is very important,
mm-hmm.
right? So they're okay with holding spots for females in school in the trades, right? The mechanics, the plumbing
STEM.
trades,
STEM.
because
Yeah.
yeah, they totally understand the importance because they see that sexism is alive and well. But they somehow simultaneously think that we are both brutish enough to be sexist, but too refined to be racist.
Mm,
So how do you talk? Because obviously in Arizona, which is not the most diverse state, and
Mhm.
you and your husband are both in professions where you're going to be in at galas, at get-togethers, where you're one of few. How do you handle these conversations when people seem to see you as proof of their
Yeah,
denial?
I
How does that
know.
experience look like for you?
I know. I'm trying to think if that has actually come out in a question. I'm sure it's often thought of.
right.
Um, but I do recall, I remembered after the murder of George Floyd, and I was working um, with a colleague, and I remember, gosh, it was, I don't remember the person, but someone who was walking around. Do you remember? And he had a gun, and then
Oh, that
they,
boy.
yeah, the
That
boy,
boy that had that gun. Remember, he
and
had
they
the
got him
Tamir,
food, and
semi-auto.
they
Tamir
asked him to sit
Rice.
down.
No, no,
Oh
no,
yeah,
no, no. It
And
was
that's not Tamir Rice.
I forgot what his name was. Oh God. Okay, I'll look it up. I'll look it up. But I know exactly what
yeah,
you're talking about.
yeah,
He was
remember.
defending stores. Is how he just
Right,
said it. Yeah.
right, right. But then nothing
Oh, yeah,
happened. I
yeah,
said,
yeah,
yeah, but, and I said, no, if that was a black person walking around with a gun like that,
That's it.
you think that? I was like, I know that. How do you not think that? And he's like, no, I just like to think it as a whole colorblind thing. I said, oh, so that I remember that vividly. I was like, we can't be colorblind by that because that is not the reality. Look what just happened. And so until we're okay knowing and noticing the differences in one another and what's happening to our population of African Americans and also what we see in all underrepresented groups there, that until we acknowledge it, then we can't educate ourselves on how to do better and address these issues of all this racism. And I mean, biases, there's unconscious and conscious biases, and what divides the two is just that level of consciousness. Um, and so, of course, racism is when you're overtly aware of what your biases are and the stereotype. But if this is truly, if they feel like being color blind is okay, then we have to see, what's shaping that and why did they feel that way. And I would say one way of educating yourself, the only way to educate yourself on biases is to admit that you have them.
Mm,
So I had to kind of share with them. I was like, I think your perception of what would happen is not reality, and this is why. And let's go back and think about what just happened.
yeah.
So yeah, now I'm ready for someone to ask me that. But you're right. Like you say, of course, we've gotten through that. It was like the Obama effect, right? You have a black president, so we should be good. You don't
right.
need to
Right.
have any more,
Right. Right.
African Americans in Congress or Senate.
Right. Right. So let me
Yeah.
ask you this, and I'm gonna kind of shift towards being very honest, right? We all know that I mean, no matter if you're black, white, I don't care. There are people that apply to dental schools that just don't have the grade, right,
Mhm.
to apply and realistically get in. And I want people to understand that that happens, right? There's grade levels and standards, and there's a deviation, right? Plus or minus. I mean, there's a deviation for everything, grade point average, DAT scores, or whatever it may be. So just because you fall under that, mean doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get in, especially if you excel at other things, right? We all can understand that. But the question I have for you is, how do you educate and help your mentees know what reality looks like versus what a complete, like you are shooting past this and you have to go through maybe an additional course or additional, maybe get a master's in order for you
Masters.
to
Uh-huh.
strengthen your application, right? We How do you have that hard discussion, because you don't want to crush their dreams, right?
Oh yeah.
Right, but you
Yeah.
also don't want them to go in there, get completely annihilated by everybody, where they just feel rejected. How do you help them and guide them through all that?
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that conversation is held many a times. And what I come to say is when we're coming together, looking through everything, and usually it's after a failed attempt, right? They didn't get accepted, and we sit back and gather and like recalibrate what is it that we need to look at. But I always tell them, I said, yes, I want you to get in dental school, but most importantly, I want you to get through dental school.
Mm,
Mm.
So if you are really struggling on the OChem portion, then let's look at what you can do. Either we can continue to take like, or not continue, or maybe get into a more structured kind of DAT prep program, or should we look at getting a master's? And I will tell too, and we tell this to the mentees, the dental schools will give you feedback. You really
mm,
can, and that's why it's important to reach out to the school and get to know someone in admissions, because they can really guide them once. I mean, I remember calling a school and say, what do you think? Or even before applying. Sometimes I've reached out to my own dental school. I said, okay, we're here this at the DAT. Here's a GPA. What do you think? And also, luckily, we have a few faculty members who sit on the admissions committee who are also serve on our board and advisory council. And so we just have right there asking them what they think. And yeah, the advice has been, look at a post-baccalaureate program, then all this the knowledge is fresh in your head that can help you on your DAT. But as far as the DAT goes, there's just a science to it on repetition, consistency. I think Laura, you probably talked about that too. Like when you're talking to mentors, like you got to put in the reps. You got to keep taking those practice tests, doing it over
I
consistently.
literally had that conversation like 30 minutes before we jumped on with one of my mentees. That like
Oh,
word
yes,
for word, I said that. So you're right. I 100%.
yeah, yeah. No. I love that you share that with them because oh, it's, I guess maybe there's just so anxious and want it to happen, that it's hard to put in the work sometimes. But then also you have to be empathetic and know that there's some students who are, have a family or they're working full time. They have to work full time. And so they don't have as much free time, applying to dental school being their full time profession right there. It's just study, 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 and just making sure they're getting all that they can. The shadowing and all that is a lot. Again, why is it important to know early on what you want to do so you can prepare?
Yeah. What's interesting about that is I've come across this phenomenon of young students who usually if you come from a family, a community with a lot of professionals that went through schooling, there's a lot of accepted norms and expectations that you have that's just groomed into you from the beginning. So you hit high school and college serious, right? Whereas a lot of people from our community, they're young. And so their first 1 or 2 or 3 years in college, they don't know exactly what they want. They're not taking it as serious. Everything's a bigger kind of experience of existentialism and, finding out who they are. And it's not until that end of third or fourth year where they're like, oh, I have to get serious. Right. Which is why we end up having to push them to masters because they weren't serious about their grades the first 3 years. But now that they're mature, they've kind of got it out of their system. Now they're ready. But their
Yeah.
track record, unfortunately, can be somewhat of a hindrance, right? At what age level do you think is the most appropriate age level for an outside organization? For the families, we say start those conversations day one, right?
Mhm.
For an organization like yours, where have you found is the best age level that if we get their hands on them at this age or at this grade level, our success is the highest long term?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, we have some data for you. As we've been doing the youth summits, we call it our Diversified Dentistry Youth Summit, and it is for middle and high schoolers. And in the beginning, our first year, when we did it, we had seventh grade all the way to 12th grade. And I will tell you through the summits, the pre-survey assessment is, have you ever thought about being a dentist? And it would be maybe 50% yes or no. But at the post summit assessment, it was like 99 to 100%, depending on which year it was. And so we know this just being the exposure to it just really just sparks that interest and they will continue to work towards it. But with the seventh and eighth grade, their engagement was not as strong. I still think they're not quite sure. This was kind of fun, but not really. It's a little bit too far out in the distance for them to really say, okay, this is what I got to do to make it happen. But that sweet spot definitely is like ninth and 10th.
Mhm.
11th grade's good. 12th graders, not as much, maybe a little bit set on it, but not to discount the 12th graders. Um, but there was in the survey Adia had done that it found that actually when they measured students on who decided or when it was most it was I remember it is now is when dental students who are graduating from dental school they took a survey and they asked at what time did they know they wanted to apply to dental school, and it was different. It was more significant for underrepresented groups that they knew in undergrad, and so
Mhm.
Mm.
that was the most important time. And maybe it's because the proximity of time, they knew what they needed to do. But still, there was a number in the data that showed that high school still was really important. I always say high school because it's in high school and middle school where you're learning those study skills to help you succeed, right? It's all about that time management, prioritizing, studying. So if we are studying well in in high school, hopefully that will help the score so that they get into the college of their choice. And when they get to college, then it's not a big surprise like, oh my God, well, how am I going to get through all these credits and study for the test? They kind of build a system now, so then they study well in undergrad. That will make them successful in, performing well on, the DAT and going forward. So sorry, from high school, making sure that helps them with their SAT, getting into undergrad, then doing well on the DAT. So, I, like you said, it starts with the family, getting them to enjoy just reading and STEM. In middle school, just continue to hone that interest, but really thinking about dentistry because it's in high school where in the summer, I have some students who can come shadow me, or they can work as a sterilization tech. They're getting in the office, and especially if there's no one in their family who's a dentist. Or even a health provider at all, um, building those relationships when they're in high school is going to be helpful. And then also, I always talk about this, getting that mentor early so you have someone that who can give you a meaningful letter of recommendation because you've built that relationship with them.
So this is going to be my last question. Then Leroy, you can keep going if you want to. But I wanted to ask you, with anything, people kind of see what you're doing now, but they don't know how you got there. Right. And just like with anything, people look at your success and go, oh my gosh, she's got 3 offices. She's killing it. She's doing, but they don't know how hard it was to get to this point. Right. And for your organization, people see the success that you have now and all the different mentorships and different summits and stuff that you're doing. But can you talk about how difficult it was? And you brought it up at the beginning, but and, with the
Mm,
Facebook group and everything, but can you talk about how difficult it was and what you guys still need so that if
oh,
somebody's listening, they can do what? They can try to reach out. And then how do we reach out?
well, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate the invitation to talk about that.
no, for sure.
Um, and I will say this, and what you both are doing as well. Any work that's meaningful is hard. And
Yes,
any
sir.
work that maybe challenges the status quo is hard. And there are times, a few people will know, stuff is on the internet, whatever. But I remember when I was invited to write an open op-ed piece for the ADA News on the importance of mentorship in dentistry, I received a hateful racist letter from a colleague, and it shut me
Hmm.
down. And it was really hard. And I wanted to just fold and just be done. But luckily, there are many who came to build me back up. Pamela Austin, she was the president of the NDA at the time, and Dr. Dan Clemenson, who was the president of the ADA at the time. And I reached out to them more so just because they were like mentors to me, just like this is what I got. What am I gonna do? I just feel awful, not expecting anything. um, they work to write a statement and about how that's not acceptable.
Hmm.
It's our code of professionalism and ethics is one of our ADA principles, and also reached out to the person and just to kind of point out, we were talking about biases. There were so many things and assumptions that was made in that letter that were hurtful but wrong,
Hmm.
right? Unreasoned, not actual. And so that's hard. But so what doesn't kill us just makes us stronger, right? And I know now because of it was that incident I felt that really did it was almost like a tipping point. And so it brought a national spotlight to our organization, and it helped grow our volunteers, our mentors, and our mentees And then I'm so grateful, and I know that's all God, when we're talking about callings and purpose. I knew I needed to do that, but I still had to pay the bills, still put the kids through college because still not getting paid. No one's getting paid. But this is a volunteer nonprofit. So what's hard now is working full time, and also running this organization and all the committee meetings and board meetings and fundraising. And I think my friends don't answer my call anymore because I know I'm asking for money. That's hard. But sometimes I do feel a little depleted by the time I get home.
Mm.
And then that's not being present for my family. So I'm intentional about that. I only have 2 more years before I'm an empty nester. And so what I have to do and what I always share with my mentees and anyone else who will listen to it is building those boundaries. We can't give when we're exhausted and tired and burnt out. And until we build those boundaries around our time and what people say or do or what we think, boundaries around ourselves, um, we can't make meaningful change. And so it's hard, but I think as we get older and progress along and get the experience behind us, we know that it's more of how we deal with the hard things, right? That resiliency, and just know it's always going to be hard, right? It's hard studying for the DAT, and it's hard when you get in dental school, and it's hard when you're building a practice, it's hard when you're starting a new job, but you get through it. My grandmother always said, "This too shall pass." And that's one of my mantras.
Well, listen, I do have a question, and I think you segued perfectly into this question. So, one of the things that I saw as a business owner, and you see the same thing with, say, drill sergeants and police officers, when you have to be in a position of authority 10 hours a day, and things have to run smooth for business to get done, for patients to be seen. Have you found, or what tips do you have to be able, you got 3 offices, you're president of this nonprofit, so you're in a position of authority a lot. Okay.
Mhm.
How do you balance, or how are you able to turn that off and then go home and be a partner and go home and be a
Oh,
patient and compassionate parent? Have you had moments where you realize, like, oh, okay, I need to do better at balancing my mentality,
Mm.
because I can't be in fight or flight, go, 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 and then bring that home and take that out on, or impose that on my husband or my kids. So what's the healthiest way that you found to be both the accomplished professional that you
oh,
are and a loving, present, parent, wife, and family?
yeah. Oh, oh, and I would be lying if I said I messed up. I've had some plenty of missteps where I didn't formalize and
Look,
I brought it home
look.
and I took it out, right? We all have.
You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
Oh,
Look.
right, right. We're all human. So one, giving yourself grace.
That's it.
But the main thing, I know the difference was when I took time to have some quiet time,
Mm.
just quiet time. And for me, I have to do it in the morning. I had a routine of, I have a devotional book. I'll read a scripture of the day, and pray. And I got the Headspace app to do some
Okay.
meditation. I'm not always consistent with that because I run out of time. It depends on what
Okay.
I got to talk to God about. But I think that is where we can give ourselves space to really think about everything that's going on in life and where we need to be more intentional in certain things. Am
Mm.
I giving my family the short end of the stick? And you know what? Sometimes I am, but I have to let them know, and they know. And I think when I have a lot of conversations with women and women's groups and organizations, they always say like, "How do you balance it all?" And I was like, "I don't. There's no way. There's no way to balance it. It's more of finding harmony
Mm.
in it and knowing that you can't do everything all at once, but some things are going to require a little bit more attention. When the youth summit's coming up, they know that the whole kitchen is overtaken with bins and white coats and type of dons, and I'm getting all that stuff organized, and they come and help. And that's one thing too in our family, is that we're all there to support one another.
Mm.
So my daughter used to be a swimmer, we would go to the meet, or my daughter who's acting, or my son who's in the jazz band. We're there for one another. So there have been times that they had to help me log in some information data, and we support one another. But I know when the time needs to be where I need to cut off everything, and it's just a family. But you don't know that if you're not listening to yourself and giving
Mm.
yourself that time and that space to really see where you need to be, and also just the gratitude, that time you have for yourself, and just to reflect back on. I think when we're doing so much, right?
Mhm.
We're going, we're succeeding, we're pushing the goalposts further and further and further, and we just keep going. But not until we take time to just reflect on our achievements, whether it's small or big, and that of our family, and then also to just dial in on and realizing who needs a little bit, even within the family, a child, my husband specifically, like who needs me the most at that time. But you'll realize that when you give yourself time to yourself.
Wow.
Beautiful answer.
Wow. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking your
Ah,
time to
Yes.
come on here. I thought this was an incredible discussion. I don't want to say interview, because we try not to be so formal, but just a discussion, just to have a friendly, meaningful discussion. So we
An
thank you
honest
so much.
discussion.
An honest
That was,
discussion.
that
And
was a
that's the
lot of
key.
honesty that you shared. We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And that's
Yeah.
very
well,
key. That's very key
yeah,
to us.
I am so grateful, and I appreciate the questions that you brought. I mean, like I said, it was and to even think and reflect back on that, and what you're doing here in this space is just so important. When we're talking about increasing representation, it's great for your audience to see dentists and knowing that they can have passions in other areas, and pursue that. And we don't have to be just narrowed down to one identity. I think
That's
we're
it.
just so much more. And I think as we continue these conversations that you're having, we're going to do pretty well in dentistry. We're going to have a whole new generation of great leaders. So thank you
Man.
so much for your
Look at that.
leadership.
That's all. And I'm going to say, if you want to come on for any other discussion, please do. You have an open
It would be
invitation
my pleasure.
from
Yes.
us to come on,
Well, you
honestly.
have an yeah, you have an open invitation to come to any of the youth summits.
Oh, I'll be there. Tell me that. Tell me when, and I promise you. Yeah. No, it's something that I think, all of us who are dentists should really consider. And it's not just a race thing. I really do believe that, because we've been given so much. We've said this before, Dr. Horton, that we've been given so much in dentistry that we somewhat have to kind of put everything in perspective. I think dentists, we do really bad with just always thinking that we're victimized by something, insurance companies or whatever it may be, or having one bad day all of a sudden makes a whole week bad. But there are times where we can sit there and say, what can we do for others? And I really do believe that that's something that we really need to work on. So,
Yes.
so yeah. How do they get a hold of you? How do they reach you? Social media and everything. We know we don't like social media, but this is good. Let's talk about it.
Oh, I know. I'm so good at it. Well, definitely, if you're interested in serving as a mentor, we need you. We need you. We have way more mentees than we have mentors, and we really let you set the cadence of the meetings. We can give you all the support you need to help them. And you can go onto our website at diversityindentistry.org. And there's a contact sheet to fill out if you're a prospective dental student and you are seeking a mentor. You can also go to that same website, diversityindentistry.org. We have the handle on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok
Uh-oh.
at Diversity in Dentistry, just at Diversity in Dentistry. And I would love to connect with you as well at drlaylahishaw.com. On my website, I really enjoy speaking as well, not for everything, but speaking on unconscious bias and how it affects our field, and also on belonging. I always talk about my 3 Bs that I like to talk about is boundaries, biases, and belonging. So and I should, 4, and barriers, talking about
There you go.
reducing barriers through mentorship. So look, I just added that. So you can learn more about how to work with me at drlaylahishaw.com.
Wow.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Today was amazing.
Yeah. We're
Thank
gonna
you.
Amazing.
end we're gonna end it there
Yeah.
with you basically just finishing the show off, so we don't say anything else and ruin it.
Oh no, you guys are amazing. Really, thank you. I've enjoyed this so much.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Truth Be Told. The opinions on this episode are just that, our opinions. Please consult your dental professional before taking any action with your dental health. If you have any questions about anything you heard on this episode, please contact us at Real Dentist with an S. That's REAL Dentist with an S at gmail.com. We would be very happy to return any message that we receive because we love the communication that we have with our listeners.